Hi, this is Mark Laughlin speaking for the Ambidextrous Gunfighter, here with our review of the Hellcat RDP, Rapid Defense Pistol, I believe it is. This we did the review last year of the original Hellcat, and I'll include links down in the description to get the details on the basic Hellcat features that we like and dislike. But just a quick summary is, I really like the I usually like paddle magazine releases, but for a button magazine release, I really like the Hellcat's button magazine release. It's easy to reach, easy to operate. There's no interference on the opposite side, so that helps it makes it work really well. It's also well protected from accidental disengagement. Probably one of the better for a button magazine release. What we didn't like was what we called the slide decorations. Very poor slide serrations. During our Bloody Hands testing, and there will be a link in the description to our Bloody Hands testing video, we found that these were almost unusable with slick bloody hands. Now, in our Bloody Hands testing, we found that while the slide serrations on the Hellcat pretty much sucked, the grip actually did pretty well. And we tested last year a bit unfairly with the flush fit magazine, so it had to overcome that compared to like the 365 XL with its longer grip with your pinky fully on the grip. I think testing this with the 13 round mag or with the pinky extension on the magazine, the 11 round mag, I think this would do quite well on a shooting portion of the Bloody Hands test. One advantage of these RMRs is that gives you something to get a hold of. If you got covered bloodied hands, you can, operate the slide using the RMR. Now, the problem is, of course, if you do have bloody hands, you probably likely smeared that all over the front of your sight. But it's not a big deal, because if you're doing both eyes open, your brain can combine seeing just the dot, even though the rest of that may be obscured from the glass. Your left eye will pick up the target. Brain combines the image from the left eye with just the dot from the right eye, and you're still on target. Now, one of our other videos we've had was couple of videos on what I call the Applegate grip ratio, which is basically a ratio of length to width. And so our pistols that have like up to a 2-to-1 ratio on that are going to be a little bit more pointable. That is, you'll be able to pick up the pistol and immediately know almost very precisely where that muzzle's pointed. Now, this pistol has a somewhat low grip ratio. I mean, it's very similar to a lot of the other compact pistols. The MC1SC and the MC2C both have pretty high grip ratios, but if we actually measure the grip ratio based upon this channel for the thumb and index finger here, it's much more competitive on that. And I found that this pistol points exceptionally well for point shooting, and I'm guessing it must have to do with that channel for the thumb and forefinger. Now, a couple of things distinguish the Hellcat RDP from the original Hellcat. One is the Compensator, and mounted on a slightly longer barrel, 3.8-inch barrel. But it also includes an RMR. And in this case, we have the Hex Wasp. You have the choice of a Shield Arms SMS, I think it's SMSc, or the Hex Wasp, all for the same package price. Now, I went with the Hex Wasp, assumed it was Springfield Armory, an American manufacturer, or at least mostly Western manufacturer. But it turns out when I was mounting it, I noticed there was a little Made in China label on the Wasp. And to me, that's very, very, if not disgusting, discouraging. Basically, it's anyone cooperating with Communist Chinese Party companies to improve or enhance the gain of function of any equipment that has martial purposes, like optics for firearms, rifle scopes, anything that has martial purpose, or even the firearms like the QBZ-95. Any quislings that are contributing to helping enhance the development of these products are basically traitors to the Western world. One thing is that the the Sig 365 series are the pistols themselves are made in the United States of America. The Hellcat is made in Croatia, which I'm okay with that. You know, prefer a little bit if it were, you know, a little bit of preference for an American-made product, but at least Croatia is a NATO ally, so at least it's a Western, sort of Western world manufacturer. Now, so I recommend, if you're gonna get the Hellcat RDP, go with the Shield Sights SMSc. Now, I could make an argument as to why and in what ways the SMSc is better than the Hex Wasp, but I'm not going to. And the reason is I don't want to, in any small way, provide any feedback as to where this sight is failing in comparison to Western-made sights. Now, the Shield Sights SMSc, it's made in the United Kingdom. I suspect there's, you know, maybe the LED and some of the parts in it are made, you know, maybe in China, but for the most part it is made in the Western world, so that's why I recommend that. And so I find this very discouraging, and at first I was thinking, okay, there we go, Springfield Armory, you know, before they had the whole controversy where they like contributed some money to an anti-Second Amendment thing, and you know, I was quite a stain on the company's reputation, and so I was thinking, okay, that added to this, that's really bad news. Now, the thing is, Hellcats and Springfield Armory is not the only one. Sig has their 365 XL package with the Sig Romeo Zero, and the Romeo Zero is made in China as well. So again, quizzling behavior, cooperating with the enemies, and very quite likely future hot enemies of the United States, if not the Western world. That's why I won't provide any information as to why this sight, actually it's pretty good, but I won't tell why it's not as good as some of the other optics out there. It's kind of like the QBZ95. In Canada, you know, citizens in Canada are not allowed to own an AR-15, but they are allowed to own a QBZ95. Now, isn't that special? It's like that's become a feedback loop for China to develop and improve the QBZ95, because, you know, in China they have no gun culture, no marksmanship culture, and so for really to develop their martial products, they have to rely upon the cooperation with the Western gun culture, Western free culture, and Western engineering, really. All right, so let's look at the other feature here, the compensator, and it has a nice little kind of self-indexing compensator, so you don't have to have any crush washers or anything like that, so it makes it easy to remove and take off during cleaning. And just threads right off and threads right back on. You notice when it threads back on, it clicks into place. You push the little tab, thread at another loop, and for this pistol, one more loop, and then that's where you're finished. Now, the compensator, when I went out and tried it, I could not tell a difference between using the compensator or shooting the gun without the compensator, as far as my own, you know, ability to discern the difference with my own hands, my own feel. So I don't know. I'm just not sure if it's a huge benefit. Now, if we look here, we got, of course, got the longer barrel. We have the longer 3.8-inch barrel, and of course, one thing that does is basically eliminates any effectiveness of the touted standoff from last year. That, you know, so that now if you push this up against something, it's going to push the pistol out of battery. But I think the longer barrel is worth it just for the little bit added velocity. I wish it had actually a longer slide, kind of like the 365 XL, so that you'd have a longer sight radius if you use the iron sights. If you're using an optic, it really doesn't matter. The sight radius is not important. Now, one thing that the compensator does present is if you kind of mess up a little bit, say on your press checks, whether you're doing them left or right hand, and you get your meat up in there between the slide and the compensator, it will bite you. or if you're using that kind of sketchy, maybe a little bit sketchy, but new, I don't know, new, it's actually a couple years old, but the technique of retention, where and really close gunfighting, where you assuring the retention of the firearm, elbows out like a basketball player getting a rebound, and then you come up and shoot right up into the neck of your opponent. Given the short slide, and I've got medium-sized hands, I guess, and that puts the meat in my hand right in the crease between the compensator and the slide. So, I mean, if that slide just moves out of battery just a little bit when firing like this, which it will, it'll shift just a little bit, good chance you're gonna get a nice little bite, get a good pinch between the comp and the slide into your hand. Of course, if you're fighting for your life, it probably won't make a difference. Now, as far as when we went out and did testing with this, I tested with and without the compensator. I kept track of 2 data points. One was I used a Mantis X10 Elite mounted here on this little kind of a pick rail here, accessory rail, and allowed the Mantis to detect, movement of the pistol. And then I also basically scored my hits, checking the minute of angle scores using the Ballistic X app. Now, on my first day of testing, I found that the break was, my scores were about 0.6% better than without the break. 0.6. So just a little over 0.5% better. So not really that significant. Oddly, was what I found in my first day scores, that shooting one-handed, I was actually 16% better without the break. 16% better shooting one-handed without the break. I have no idea why that would happen. However, when it came to shooting two-handed, the break did better by a little over 20%. So again, maybe it's just the short data points. I did have some issues with the Mantis X10 Elite that day, maintaining sync, so maybe some frustration there set in and skewed the results in some way. Now, each day I shot about 200 rounds, and on the second day, I think it seemed like my data collection was a little bit better. And on my second day, my Ballistic X MOA score was 38% better without the break. And this is two-handed shooting, and it was left and right-handed. However, during rapid fire drills, using the break, my scores were 7% better. So quite a bit better without the break during slow fire shooting, and 7% better with the break during rapid fire shooting, which was kind of, you would expect, definitely expect the break to help during rapid fire drills. Interestingly, the Mantis X10 scores were 7% better without the break during the slow fire drills, but was 8% better during the rapid fire drills. So we're consistently seeing, whether it's the group size or Mantis X detecting movement of the pistol, slightly better scores with out the break during slow fire, and better scores during rapid fire. Now, my rapid fire was I guess I would call it more like semi-rapid fire. I think if you got into some real rapid fire stuff, maybe then we would actually, you know, see even more enhancement or better performance with the brake than without. But overall, I really could not detect any benefit of the brake by feel. I just could not discern a difference between the two. Now maybe that's just because I'm just not that good of a shooter and can't make that discernment. I'm sure, you know, someone like maybe Rob Leatham can distinguish between the two, but for me, I think I'll run it without the brake. Now, something else Springfield did for the RDP was a version 2.0, I guess, of their trigger. And the trigger we found last year, some of our testers thought that the Springfield was a little bit better than the Sig P365. Some could not really tell the difference. I could not tell much of a difference. I thought they were both really good. The trigger again this year is really good as well. Now, I think what they did was there was that kind of issue that kind of made the rounds on the internet forums about the trigger getting bound up or locked up, so to speak. And basically, the only way I was able to recreate it last year was by, you know, taking some pretty concerted effort to push on the side of the trigger, push it sideways, then try to engage the trigger, and that safety dongle would, you know, basically get bound up and wouldn't allow it to fire. So this year, that issue has been solved. It is no longer a problem. So I guess that's good, although I just did not find it an issue last year. Now, when we go to compare this, the Hellcat, whether it's the original Hellcat or the RDP, with the SIG offerings like the standard P365 or the P365 XL, which just kind of like mimics the 365 XL with the longer barrel, and with the if you run the Pinky Mag extension or the 13 round mag, it's very much like the 365 XL. Now, one thing is, I've often noted that the SIG pistols, the P365 series, the height from the top of the slide to the top of the trigger guard on the Hellcat is quite a bit more. It's about a quarter, maybe almost 3/8 of an inch more higher than the SIG P365 offerings. And that has something to do, I think, with the fact that SIG was able to get theirs really low because they actually got their extractor really low. They use that little pivot on the safety plunger, whereas the Hellcat just drags this nub across the safety, and which theoretically would give the SIG an advantage on trigger feel, but I really can't say that one is better than the other. So maybe if they got really dirty, you might start noticing the SIG would retain its better trigger for longer. Although one thing to keep in mind is with that little pivot point, that is, you know, maybe a potential failure point at some point that could break. And if, you know, if that little pivot pin were to break and that couldn't disengage the safety plunger, then of course the pistol's not going to fire. And whereas the Hellcat is using a much cruder method of disengaging this, the striker safety. Now, you would think, just looking at this measurement, you would think that the bore axis on the Hellcat is going to be quite a bit higher than the 365. But back here at the beaver tail, the Hellcat has actually got your web of your thumb up pretty high up into the grip. And actually a little bit, there's the 365 is a little bit thicker here than the Hellcat. So in some ways, your bore axis over the web of the thumb is on the Hellcat is equal to the SIG P365. What that does mean, though, is that given that the trigger is down a little bit lower, that does mean your trigger finger is coming down maybe a little bit more of an angle and maybe not pulling quite straight as straight back as maybe the 365 series do. Interestingly, and when I did the testing, two-handed testing, using both eyes open, with one eye using the optic on the Hellcat and the other eye using the optic on the 365 XL, running the SMSc, and I found that, you know, my brain was combining the left and right eyes, and there's a whole video on that, that kind of weirdness down in the description. But my brain was combining the images from each eye, so I basically saw 2 dots out on the target, and I was able to shoot quite easily and pretty accurately with both pistols firing at the same time. And in fact, when I checked the my average group scores, and this is just, you know, a total 2 10-round mags, so only 20 rounds of tests, but I found that my average group score was identical between the two, and they were pretty good, pretty decent groups. I mean, definitely well within the, I think, you know, normally say, if, you know, 5 rounds, 5 yards, 5 seconds within 5 inches, and it was definitely within all of that, and probably within under 3 inches. So pretty cool that, you know, that, and this may be because of my ambidextrous training, but it was able to combine, you know, my brain was able to combine the sighting systems from each eye. Anyway, I want to thank Sportsman's Warehouse out of Gillette, Wyoming, for handling my FFL transfer for me on this. And actually, I do like the Hellcat a lot. I also like the 365 XL a lot as well. I have, for my personal use, gone with the 365 XL, mainly just because of family issues. Both my sons have 365 XL, so for the sake of family magazine compatibility, I've gone with the 365 XL. Even though the 365 XL is probably my standard 9mm EDC, actually the Kel-Tec P17 is my probably 70% of the time now go-to for my EDC. Now, I of course live in a low crime area, but there are also some reasons for that. And for example, the paddle magazine release, to me that alone is almost worth it to prevent an accidental disengagement of the magazine. So that you know, the worst thing if you're in a self-defense situation is if you have a accidentally disengaged magazine and you fire that first shot, now you don't have another round in the chamber for this follow-up shot. So that's one reason I use the P17, it's the paddle magazine release, but also the 22 LR is actually surprisingly effective. Check out my video, How the 22 Wins, 9mm versus 22 long rifle, link in the description. But I would not have any problem whatsoever running the Hellcat. I would, though, ask, if you're an American or in the Western world, when you order the Hellcat RDP, go with the Shield SMSc. Please do not help with Chinese gain of function on any martial equipment. It's Mark Laughlin speaking for the Ambidextrous Gunfighter. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.